Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you. I do appreciate it. If you're listening to the audio only, you might want to do everybody a favor and check out the YouTube video or the video on Rumble. And you know what? Just give it a like, share, subscribe, all those good things to make it easier for people to find us just like you did. Advertisements almost out of the way. In the last episode, I talked about the image of the being we call Satan and what some people think it looks like compared to what it probably looks like. And I want to expand on that just a little bit. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to start with Genesis 2:17. Okay, very familiar, I hope. But you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. Yeah. Now, chances are, if you are an English-only speaker or English is your first language, your mind probably conjures up an image of maybe Eve picking an apple off a tree, right? The apple has become the forbidden fruit. From the things I've been able to read, the apple didn't actually become the image of the forbidden fruit until the 12th century AD, about 900 years ago. That's a long way from creation. So why do so many people have this image of an apple when they read this? When they think of the fruit that Eve ate, why do they think of it as an apple? Well, there's a few reasons. There's artistic influence, right? You know, people have been drawing it and picturing it for a long time. But the other big reason is actually related to the language itself. Now, I'm not talking about the language insinuates that it's an apple. That's not what I'm saying. English, like Greek and some other languages, is descriptive or a noun-based language. And we learn as we're speaking this while we're young to form images in our mind. We have a need for description. We want to know what things look like. We want to know what things should be like. Hebrew and the other Semitic languages, on the other hand, they don't have this need for description. Instead, they focus on the action of what's being said. They're verb-based languages. So what the forbidden fruit looks like to someone who is learning the Semitic languages is not as important as what it does, what it causes, what is the outcome of it. Now, hopefully I can explain this another way. We're going to look at someone described in the Bible, and I think we can see the difference. John the Baptist is described this way in Matthew 3:4. John wore a garment of camel hair and a leather belt around his waist. His food was locust and wild honey. Now, someone unfamiliar with the Hebrew language wouldn't know that John is actually being described as someone who has taken a Nazirite vow. And that doesn't mean he's from Nazareth, right? John has taken a vow to serve our Creator. He wouldn't have cut his hair. He would wear plain clothing. He would never drink alcohol. And there were other personal choices that they would make as well. Now, on a short side note, if you've ever eaten grasshoppers that have been fried in olive oil, you would know the reason for the honey. It improves the taste a lot, okay? Okay, just putting that out there. So the image that a lot of English-only speaking people have is John and what he looks like. But the Hebrew speaker would focus on what he does, what he has done, what he is doing, what he's going to do. And I hope that helps clarify this just a little bit. And there's no real description of what Yeshua, Jesus, looked like while he was on earth. But I've been in a lot of Christian churches, The majority of them have that picture of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus hanging on the wall somewhere. Now, there is a tradition that this picture is actually the son of Pope Alexander VI. And that makes a lot of sense because the age, the timing is right for when it first appeared. But there is a description of him after the ascension. It's given in Revelation 1, 14 and 15. The hair on his head was white as wool, as white as snow. His eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were polished bronze, refined in a furnace. And his voice was like the roar of many lions. Now, that doesn't, if you get an image in your mind of what someone like that would look like, it doesn't look like the picture you're probably familiar with, does it? And it also shows us some Greek influence in that because, this language is so descriptive. I think there was some help there with the Greek along the way. When we read the description of heaven, for instance, in the Old Testament, the writers focus on what's happening, what's going on. They're focused on the action. They're not focused on what it looks like. But a lot of us, especially if you're my age and you grew up watching the cartoons of Sylvester and Tweety or Tom and Jerry, when they would get killed, they would float up to heaven. You saw that white image of them floating up. And they would first see gates of pearl, St. Peter standing there, right? Streets of gold. But that image isn't describing heaven. That image actually comes from the description of the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21:21. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, with each gate consisting of a single pearl. The main street of the city was pure gold, as clear as glass. Think about that. Think about that. If you have this image in your mind that heaven is going to be, I'm going to walk through those pearly gates and it's going to be wonderful. That's not heaven. That's the New Jerusalem. So hopefully you're kind of wondering why getting these images in our minds correct is important to living the way we're designed to live. And it's because when we are young and we're growing up, we either learn to focus on the actions or we focus on the descriptions. We need to learn to focus on what's really important. Not be influenced by language or by art. We need to train our minds to focus on what is actually important, the most important. Now, does it matter what John or Jesus look like? No, it really doesn't. In fact, I know a lot of people who grew up watching the Ten Commandments movie, every spring around, just before Easter, the Ten Commandments would be on television. So just about everybody I know, Moses looks like Charlton Heston. Now, a lot of people realize Moses doesn't look like Charlton Heston at all. Does it matter? Not really, because they realize and understand that Moses isn't going to look like Charlton Heston. They're going to recognize him for who he is, but he's not going to look like Charlton Heston. It's just not going to happen. But it is through that artwork, that artistic influence that many, many, many people have in their minds. When they hear the name Moses, they picture Charlton Heston in that role. They hear his voice. Is it wrong? Not really. They've just been influenced. But we need to train ourselves not to receive that influence. Because when we train ourselves not to receive that influence, we can then, when we hear anything, think about it critically, think about it intelligently, not just accept someone else's ideas, not just adopt someone else's problems, not just take in or take for granted what someone else says is true, we learn to think for ourselves, and we can apply that to everything. Are you going to allow someone to influence you in a way that you shouldn't be influenced, for instance? Think about this. If someone says, "Oh, come on, let's go do this," and you know you shouldn't, are you going to allow that influence to take you in that direction? Or are you going to have some resistance? Hopefully you have a lot of resistance. We have to stop allowing others to put these images in our mind. We need to work these things out for themselves, so that we can apply those concepts to other things in our life. And it helps with not just being influenced by someone trying to fool us with maybe fancy words, maybe advertisements. And on that note, watch this. If I can find it, here's my advertisement for the day. You go to authorjerrymitchell.com. That's where the books are sold. I appreciate it when you do that. And by the way, check out the new givegod90.com too. Okay. You see how I did that there, right? You know, I was telling you not to be influenced by advertisements, and I gave you an advertisement. Yeah. That's not subliminal. That's right up on top. Not fooling anybody there. If you want to know more, I cracked myself up a little bit. If you want to know more, go ahead, read the books. They're there for your information. And hopefully, this gives you a lot to think about this week. Don't let somebody else's concepts, somebody else's ideas influence you in a way that might not be accurate. It's very, very important. You learn to think for yourself. And I've said this, I don't know how many times now. When you learn to think things through, start to finish, don't overthink it, just analyze it properly. You can apply these things not just to the Bible, but to every aspect of your life. If I take this job that's being offered to me, is it a good move or is it not a good move for my family? You learn how to analyze these things, see them for exactly what they are, not for what they are portrayed to be. Something to think about this week. Until next time, and until then, I do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.